to hit the go live button. I have to start streaming and go live, so we'll see
Okay.
where people catch us. But yeah, no, this Arctic blast thing is like bonkers. I don't ever really remember seeing this kind of crazy. So I'm glad you got out of it. But we've been under temperature up here, but not too bad, right? It's like it's doable. But I'm seeing people with like highs of like negatives, double digits. Good
Yeah.
luck, folks. Stay inside and watch us on TV.
Yeah, I mean, I've no there's no position for me to start complaining, but yeah, I did not try and time the timing. Right? I booked my flight way in advance, so it was
Yeah.
already on the calendar to get out of there. So,
Well, I'm glad
but
you got out because like this stuff
yeah,
always screws up the flights. But yes, we're gonna talk through a little bit more following up from our last live stream
right.
on AI, we're building with AI and the story of I put up an app in about 6 hours in the App Store. I'll give a quick update on that. Last week I didn't know what it was called. This week I know what it's called.
No, you had it. It just took you a second, I think.
It went so fast, like, I didn't even realize, like, what you usually think about stuff, you're, like, building a thing, it takes weeks or, like, sometimes months, and then you kind of, like, build up this mental picture, but it was literally happening so fast that I was just like, "I don't really have a mental picture yet." Anyway, the app is called Your Pods. It's now available almost everywhere on the planet. There's a couple countries where I'm working through regulations.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, but, get it on the Apple App Store. This week, as of this morning, I haven't looked, I should have probably looked, but I haven't. 5 people purchased it this week.
Okay.
So, thanks,
And
people who purchased it.
thanks, mom,
Um,
dad,
yeah,
brother, sister.
right. Well, and that was funny because we were talking about that before,
Yeah.
we went live, but I actually don't know these people. And I committed the cardinal sin. So typically when you start something, startup or even, put out an app, you
Friends and
beg your
family.
friends and
Friends and
family,
family
right?
around. Yeah, friends and family around. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Please purchase my thing. And I didn't
Mhm.
do that. And I actually have some friends, the friends from last week who I was talking about, I don't even know if they bought it. I think
Yeah,
they might
yeah.
still be using the beta.
Does it work with the beta?
I'm gonna have to sell support contracts or something to, like, recoup.
Mm,
I
mm.
don't know. No, no, yeah, there's a test flight beta. If you don't wanna pay or wanna try it out, you can. I'm gonna try to keep that going. Apple, like, frowns upon that practice,
Yeah.
um but anyway, yeah, so about 6 hours of work got in the App Store. I've had 4 updated builds since then that have pushed through the App Store. 0 issues with the App Store process so far, which
Yeah.
is incredible. Like, I've
Yeah, I was gonna
complained
say we
about
were
this
chatting
quite a
about
bit.
this. Yeah, yeah. For those who don't
And
know, it's
yeah,
yeah, it's an arduous process, the App Store
even
release process.
and even if you do everything right, you usually get flagged for some reason, right? And so
Right.
hitting 100% on that, I mean, sure, it's just a matter of time, but the fact that it is coded and documented and all that stuff, whatever Apple's really looking at to verify it's doing it, and it's doing it well, and it's consistent, and I'm not having issues. 5 people international too, which is really cool. Shout out Germany, the Netherlands, and UK. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's really cool, right? Like, I put it up there, that we've talked about it. There's a little bit of a monetary thing with Apple. You gotta have a developer license, basically, so
Mhm.
a couple bucks. I'm gonna open source it. We were talking earlier, the source is about ready to go. I was trying to fix some Apple Watch issues before I pushed out the source so that it, like, actually works well if you wanna
Yeah.
compile it yourself. But yeah, it supports iOS, iPadOS, macOS, it has CarPlay, Apple Watch support, and then I'll be adding podcast search. We'll see. Well, that's the goal. We'll see if it actually gets in or
Yeah.
not. And then, yeah, uh, unbelievable, and it's all AI driven for the I mean, I'm having to think a little bit more as it gets more advanced. I'm doing more architect-y kind of stuff, but, like, I
Got
still
it.
haven't
Yeah.
written a line of code.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we were talking about it before too. It's not just that you were able to build this or release this and get paid people, but we were talking about the product itself. It is pretty niche. Like
Yeah.
we were joking around. We're like, how many people actually would use this thing? And
Yep.
turns out there's at least 5. So
Yes.
it's cool that you
Yeah.
just built this thing and not really knowing what the exact audience was or what that looked like, and then
Yeah.
people just bought it, right? So it's
No,
like
and that's an
you don't know
awesome
what you don't know.
point. Yeah, yeah, and I haven't done any, like, PR or marketing for this either. I've done a couple LinkedIn posts. We talked about it briefly on the podcast last week. So most of the people who even probably would wanna use it don't know it exists.
Mhm.
You can find it in the App Store, obviously. So I think that's probably what happened. Maybe there are folks who watch the podcast. If you are, cool. Hello. But, yeah, it is a niche kind of product, and that's probably why there isn't, existing apps for iOS at least.
Mm.
There's a couple of macOS apps, and it's the audience that this is really built for are people who are running a variation of an API that another service initiated called gPodder, right? So I don't
Yeah.
honestly know a ton about it, but it I believe allows you to it operates a syncing service. I believe it's free. Maybe it has ads. I don't know. I'm not condoning it, but it seems I like looked at it really quick. It seems pretty cool. Someone implemented that on top of another service called Nextcloud, which allows you to host your own server to do
Yeah.
document share, kind of like all the Google or Microsoft Online features yourself. A lot of companies and organizations use it, especially in Europe, to like decloud themselves from like American clouds or have more control over the experience that their users get. So in the US, it's probably not super popular. A lot of people do it at home, a few instances, but it's much more popular across the globe. But that's to say, like, from a software, like, mass market is what most people are trying to go for, not that kind of an
Yeah.
app.
Right.
But at the same time, like, clearly there's people who find it valuable and it does, it works. Like, it's again, it's not the most pretty app on the planet. It's very functional. So far it works. If there's bugs, feel free to submit a bug report. We'll take a look. But yeah, it and I think, like, for me, that really highlights the niche where this vibe codey I can't even call it vibe code because I
It's
feel
not
like
really
vibe
vibe
code
coding
has
anymore.
been
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I agree
Yeah,
with you. Yeah, I agree with you. It's not vibe coding anymore. Yeah.
and I think that assumes that I'm coding, and I haven't, right? It's like
You're
literally AI coded, right? So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
a step
You're
beyond vibe
architecting.
coding.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and again, like, but I guess, like, for me, it just shows that all of these niches of software that you would normally think about as like a product team or even like a company, you're like, market's too small, we don't really see the payout." Now you have a bunch of people who hopefully will be like me in the future and put out, solutions to the problems that they have, or if they're a little bit more technical and have friends like in my instance, um, that need something, I'm like, here it is, and other people can use it. And I encourage everyone to open source stuff too, so that anyone can.
Yeah.
It's going to be GPL 3'd, so it's pretty permissible in terms of open source licensing. So it's again, it's not there yet. I'll probably get it done this weekend. It's just on the list. But I think with the capabilities of this stuff are clearly here.
Yeah.
I think you can build much higher on this. So like this problem, even though it was pretty abstract, was also pretty finite in terms of what the outcomes need to be. It needs to be able to play episodes, and like what is a podcast player is like fairly understood, by people and also the model. Not to say that there wasn't a lot of challenges involved and a lot of, kind of going through shit like anything else in software. But it was definitely uh I would say low hanging fruit in terms of like AI-ness.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Whereas other stuff, like like I've said before, you're not gonna go make a full Facebook clone tomorrow, and take out Facebook, right? But you might be able to make an app that is similar to Facebook for your friend group or something, in a few hours of work. So there's this whole space that I think has been kind of ignored that I'm really excited for the opportunity for people to like get in and start solving software problems, or you have a task reminder app, for example. That's always one that everyone tries to rebuild. If you want it specifically a specific way for you, you can do that now, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, going to take a few steps back, we commented on, this isn't really vibe coding anymore. And just
No.
so we're clear, my definition of vibe coding is, the original Andre Karpathy's for variation, where it's like, when you're coding, you're manually coding, and you have these autocompletes that's finished by AI. You're just hitting tab, tab,
Yeah.
tab. So that's where the vibe coding thing came from.
Yep.
But we've already leapfrogged that stage, and now people like Andrew are uh, build, building prompts or guiding AI to build something, and you're not really sitting there writing code anymore. All the code is generated by the AI agent, and maybe you're looking it over, you get some sense of how it works. You don't need to know
Yep.
exactly how to redo it or restructure it. And you just say, this looks good. Let's kind of build this other feature or something like that. Right. And I think that takes it beyond the realm of vibe coding. I actually think vibe coding is old now. People
I
shouldn't
know,
be doing
right?
that anymore. We had a little conversation about like open source autocomplete models, and we're both like, well,
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds cool, but now you just have the AI write the code for you. You don't need the autocomplete anymore. So that's kind of just a quick clarification on what we're talking about when we're saying you didn't really vibe code because you didn't actually have your hands on the keyboard coding. Um, but
Yeah.
your example, I think, and what you're highlighting, I think, is exactly where I personally see this trend. Is uh, there was a period of time in software where you had these platforms that would try and do very generic level things, and then one
Yep.
of the ways that would make money is to start finding ways to implement their software specifically for you, right? So if you were an enterprise
Yeah.
customer, they would take their software, tailor it to your specific workflows so that you can use their software so it does exactly what you needed to do because what came out of the box wasn't 100% there. And what you just did, building something that filled a niche, is I think exactly what the world is headed towards in terms of software, where you're going
100%.
to have people who want to go and build their own solutions for their own specific problem. Right. So
Yep.
this ties into a lot of stuff we talked about before, where you got to make sure you know what your problems are that you're trying to solve, what your outcomes are, so that when you build your solution, that it actually does what it's supposed to do,
Yep.
and it's highly tailored to your use case. So we're moving towards this model of build your own solution rather than buy something commercial off the shelf because it's cheap,
And
on
it's kind
par
of
with
back to
cost.
full
And
circle, right? When
yeah,
computing was more abstract, but also somewhat easier with like, Bash and DOS and all this kind of stuff, like, that was how a lot of people accomplished stuff, but you had to sit there, you had to learn this language, you had a lot of trial and error, you had to kinda think like an engineer. You don't really have to do that anymore. It does help, but, I'm, like, fully and totally convinced now that vibe coding is dead, like, AI coding is here, the average quote unquote person, I feel like the average person is pejorative, but people who don't consider themselves technical are now capable of technical execution, and again, this makes money, like, $1,000,000 product? No, maybe, I doubt it, but you never know, but the barrier is so far removed now for folks to be able to just start.
Mhm.
And that's, I
Um,
guess, the message that I have on this, and that's why I wanted to talk about it was like, just start. Go try it. Figure out why it doesn't work. Figure out, that's most of and like the vibe code stuff works pretty well. AI code stuff works pretty well. It still does some really dumb shit.
yeah, that's for sure.
And
But
I'm
hey, guess what? Humans do too.
Yeah, and I guess and I think too, like, I'm also using, this process to do something novel. And the big difference, I think, between something known and something novel when it comes to this AI stuff is, like, most code is, like, understood. Most ways of operating are kinda standardized at most scale, right? If you wanna operate at billions of people scale, you're totally different and, like, you're fine. But for almost everything else and for almost any company that doesn't really operate at a massive scale, it a lot of this stuff's kinda solved, and you just probably don't know about it or you don't have the exposure, and so AI can really move you forward very quickly. As soon as you start to hit the, edge cases or starting to get into novel solutions or novel problems, then it doesn't solve solutions for you, and then I kind of go back into vibe coding where I'm having to, like, really think through
Got
stuff
it.
or
Yeah, yeah.
actually, like, write code sometimes, to try things and then give it to it to say, "How do I improve it?" Or it's more back to, like, it's my coworker giving me feedback
Mhm.
and not the, like, intern that I'm kind of helping direct do.
Yeah.
Um, but it can still move you along if you're doing novel work in other ways we've talked about too. If it's not code generation, it's helping you understand stuff more quickly or giving you the context to like read the comments faster is like huge for me. And I think like, so I want to be clear on that too, that like, I'm not proclaiming that, the engine software engineer is dead. And there's so much hype about that. I'm so sick of hearing it because it's not true.
Mm,
But the ability for people to extend, who are like not technical at all, to dip a foot into technical, people who are like kind of technical or have worked in software. There's a ton of people who work in software that don't actually write software. Now they can, in
yeah.
quotes, like they can, kind of guide it. That's awesome. I think that's really great. That's a huge opportunity. I think this is really cool. And then I think for the rest of us folks, like I think it's still super, super helpful, but I think it also is a little bit harder to um, actualize the value for when you're hitting novel stuff. And I think we're talking a little bit. I was going to segue into like what is the approach that I took to do this, because I think
Mhm.
that's where we talked a little bit about it last week with like you're kind of the manager, and I was thinking about that a little bit afterwards. I was like, I don't think that's right. Um, I think it's a better frame than like vibe code or like you're the person doing all the work, but like I think I don't think it's quite right. But interestingly enough, I was talking to a friend about this kind of we're talking about something totally different, super novel. And I was like, AI doesn't work. I was kind of jamming on Gemini a little bit just to see, like, I'm like, I don't think it's gonna work, but like, what's it gonna
Yeah.
do when
Why not
it
try it? Right. Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah. See
gonna
what
get a
happens. Yeah.
truly novel thing. And it failed miserably on the first attempt, but then I kind of worked with it a little bit to start to give it more context, to start to identify like what we were going for. And then it started to I was like, the epiphany that I had was like, well, what other fields of study within like computer science or math are we hitting on that we might not be
Mhm.
aware of? So it's like I was like, what else don't where would I gave it some, I don't remember exact prompt, but it's basically something along the lines of like, I want to learn more about things that are edge cases to these problems. How to, what would that be? That was actually pretty helpful. Like it
Mhm.
didn't, wasn't revolutionary, but it helped expose those threads that you might not know about or might not have considered, or if you're like me, kind of filed in the back of your mind, and then you're like, oh yeah, I should go look at that more. And then that might give you inspiration for something else. But the approach I'm taking on this and so this conversation happened, and then I was explaining kind of what I'm going to explain now is that I've broken up the code base into uh, effectively abstractions. So normally you would break up a code base. Well, there's all sorts of ways to do it, but you're probably breaking it up on a feature, or you're working on some sort of a branch of some sort of,
Mhm.
you have some, outcome you're
Yeah.
trying to drive.
Flow. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's the wrong approach for the most of this. So what I've done is I've broken it out into abstractions aligned to the context required to execute. So for the podcast player, I should just maybe pull it up. I don't actually remember what they all are, but I have an abstraction for watchOS. So you could say that's a feature.
Mhm.
What is a feature is always like a kind of, I think, a debate,
Yeah.
but like you could
Big
say that's a
yes.
feature, but it's also a totally different operating system. It's a
Mhm.
totally different set of things. And so I was trying to build on my main code base with my main bot army.
Yeah.
And it started to really get it was all over the place because I was giving it all these different commands and trying to do all this different stuff as it was kind of coming to me. And then I kind of came across this idea. So I split that out. I split out the queue management. So how you queue episodes. And there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that happens with that to like make it super fast and reliable and give you options to automate stuff in the app. But that, a queuing list for a podcast player is probably not a feature in a traditional sense. But to fight through the problems and the development and the bugs from the AI perspective, all those other threads are kind of irrelevant and they kind of get touched, but
Right.
through the narrow focus of this is the thing that we're really trying to focus and work on. And after I kind of started to figure out like how to abstract the abstractions for the AI,
Mm,
rocket ship progress. And that's what I
mm.
wanted to really share is it's you have to, and this is going to be different for every project, probably for other different models, but if you're not having success on what you think you're trying to do or trying to work on, I would push people to think a little bit more abstractly and from the model's perspective. Because like what I would consider a feature and how I would like branch a software program is not at all, I think, how it would relate to how it works best for the AI to operate.
Interesting. Can you give a little more um, detail on what you mean by when you build these abstractions? Like, what does that look like, right? So, we're getting deep into like maybe engineering, software engineering, but
Yeah,
I can think of
nerdland.
one way. Well, one way of doing this, right, is if you're working in a traditional repository, you have
Yeah,
one file, right? For Claude, it might be the Claude.md file. For others, it could just be a flat MD
yeah,
file or text file, really, right? And you just basically dump your prompt or your context. So one way to do this is in your main branch, you have maybe no context, or you have a general outline of what your product or project is. And
right.
then on one branch, you change that so that it's specifically geared towards building what it is. So, for instance, if it is like a watch thing, you have a branch that says, or that replaces your instruction file with like, hey, this is a
Right.
watch OS thing. Whereas in your main one, it's like, hey, this is a full stack application or something like that. And you can do the same
Yeah,
for mobile, right? So that's one way of doing it. But in your workflow, what did that look like? Was it something like that,
yeah.
or was it a little bit more
Kind
ad
of,
hoc?
yeah,
Okay.
I'm using anti-gravity. I'm not a tools person, but, I really like the features of that specifically
Yeah,
versus
Antivirus is
Cloud Code,
interesting.
but
Yeah.
Cloud Code's great. It works fine. Like, it's there's nothing wrong with it. But with anti-gravity, each workspace is kind of already shaped to that. So what I did is I
Okay.
used,
Yeah.
workflow branching with the Git. It's a
Okay.
Git feature, and so then I broke those out into, what would technically be features, but more abstractions of the code base for the workspace and anti-gravity to map to, and then I let it go. And then so each, like, chat you do within the workspace is kind of like a new context.
Yeah.
And so you
Mhm.
still have to kinda manage that a little bit, like, as you get deeper, as you are trying to do really hard stuff, it gets worse, and so sometimes you have to start a new chat kinda thing, like, that hasn't gone away. It's gotten a lot
Mhm.
better, but it's still there, it's still a problem. But all of the watchOS stuff goes to the watchOS workspace, which is still in the same code base, it's just, work
Yeah,
branched
yeah, 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 yep, okay,
over,
okay.
and then I commit those changes back, and then the other nice thing about that, and the primary reason I actually did this wasn't necessarily to shape context, but it was really more around it's way more efficient to be able to work on way more things. And so each
Yes.
workspace, I have my agent, my murder of agents.
I think they call them swarms, but yeah.
Yeah, so the joke is that you call a group of crows a murder, and so I try
Yeah,
to apply that to everything because it's
to
hilarious. So my murder of agents, then sits in that workspace, and then, I do customize those with the like you're talking about the markdown
yeah,
files
yeah,
and stuff.
yeah, yeah.
But I find I don't have to do too much of that unless I'm getting really deep in stuff, but, then within each workspace, I just queue up some work, the murder swarm goes, and, as stuff gets done, I address it, and sometimes it
Mhm.
takes 5 minutes, sometimes it takes an hour, just depends on what I do. I'm still trying to figure out, like, how much detail to give it, how much abstraction I can go, 'cause I find sometimes it nails it, and sometimes it just makes
Yeah,
it
yeah.
harder, to, like, I have to fix more shit now because it just hallucinated a bunch of stuff, or what more accurately happens is it takes a fuck ton of shortcuts,
Yes.
which logically makes sense, but then in actual, like, operations don't,
Yes.
or all the edge cases that it's not thinking about are happening, and there's ways to get around that kind of stuff too, but, I think that's where, like, a lot of, like, developers, engineers really get, mad because I could do it easier myself. Well, maybe yes or no, but if you can get the mix of giving it enough detail right, most of the time I find I could not even write the code faster than
Faster,
writing an
right.
abstract blob to then write the code and then test the code and then build the code, and then oh, by the way, instead of writing that code, I'm now doing 2 or 3 other things, or I'm reviewing another plan for
Right.
another big feature. And I think
Yeah.
that workflow makes a lot of folks uncomfortable, but that's where we were kind of talking about the manager. I think maybe, maybe we show this like next week or something. Like
Mm,
I think I don't want to get too big into like this is the solution, this is how you do it. Like this has worked really well for me, and I think it's also very different from how I've worked before. I mean, I'm a
mm,
product person, so I'm always in some weird abstracted
yeah.
land, but,
Yeah.
like, when it comes to the actual application of doing stuff, uh, it's working in that your AI is an abstraction. You're working with abstraction ideas, like, even the ideas you have are abstractions, but it's really figuring out, like, how much detail and how much pointing to do versus how much you give the model kind of leeway to do it, but more
Yep.
importantly, instructing it on the outcome, and I think by giving it an abstract outcome, I will sometimes make way more progress, and then I'll go mop up the bugs later versus here's a serialized list of things, or we're gonna just do straight iterative, and I'll do that sometimes too. It really like, there's no right or wrong way, I think, to approach it, and there's no, like, solution. It's just
Mhm.
more of, like, a capabilities, and that's where, like, my liberal arts training for this has been the best training ever, right? This is like social science. Like, how does group dynamics work? Well, I have a murder swarm, and I got
Mhm.
one that's frustrated, right?
Quote unquote frustrated. Yeah.
And I got these other ones, but like, how do you give it the context? And then, like, again, going back to the managerial thing, how do you, empower your team to work? It's the same kind of idea, but it's in a slight, because I wouldn't probably give a team a bunch of really abstract ideas and be like, hey, go figure it out. I
No, I mean,
probably,
depending on what you're
I
running. Yeah,
would, to be
depending on
honest.
what
But
I was yeah, depending on what kind of company you're in, but yeah, sure. Yeah,
yeah,
I think that's the key element is like it is a little bit of delegation, right? What kind of freedom
yeah,
you're giving to the agent to do. And I think the key point about the outcome or the expected goal is actually very useful in terms of prompt engineering or context engineering is you have in mind if you have in mind what you're trying to do, even if it's abstract, like what you're
yeah,
hoping to try and accomplish. I think giving that guidance actually helps LMs do what you're hoping them to do, whatever it was. So that's always a good tip. But I personally have tested providing very very little detail just to kind of see what it does, and then
yeah,
also going over the top and saying, because I'm the engineer or because I'm a software engineer,
right.
I know, like, hey, by the way, this function in this code does
Yep,
this, and this is the way it's doing it. So like I go on extreme ends just to kind of see what it does. And to be honest, I found even with very, very brief instruction code, as long as your code is decently structured, the LM still pretty much get it 80% of the way there.
yep,
And to your point about not being an engineer, even as an engineer, my workflow has changed because I'm not writing code a lot. I may change and tweak code, but for the most part,
yep.
AI is the first thing I go to scaffold things out to start and if I see something wrong, I fix it myself. Sometimes I even get the AI to fix it because I don't want to.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
and I find that it makes really strange determinations, and that's part of the generative nature of it, but, like,
yeah,
sometimes it'll make really strange shortcuts that I'm like, "I kind of see why we're here, but also weird." Like,
yeah,
really
yeah.
bad design, really bad, like, there's like, I was pushing it to do something, and it was like, "Well, the best way to do it is to create a race condition," and it's like, no."
Ja- Google, take that note.
I mean, it
Probably
didn't
don't.
say like, "Gee, I'm gonna create a race
Yeah, yeah,
condition for
yeah.
this
Right, right. It
reason,"
didn't
but,
explicitly say, "Hey, I'm going to create this risk condition." Yeah, yes.
yeah, but, like, the solution was, like, really bad,
It
and
ended up being good. Yeah.
nobody would have done it, but I kinda let it go, and it was like, the app started to crash, of course, right? And then, I I think another thing that maybe to help with people too is when you're doing really hard stuff or really complicated stuff, it sometimes helps to bring in another model and get a quote unquote different perspective. And that's what I did
Mm.
with that. And it was like, oh, the user created a race condition. Why would you do that? And I'm like, well, I mean, working with AI will, I think, give you much more thicker skin than
Yeah, yeah.
I just take the
I
blame for
mean,
everything and move on, and which is kinda like what it would be like with the dev team, right?
in
I'm like,
real
"Oh,
life.
we fucked
Yeah,
up. That's my
exactly. Yeah,
fault,"
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, as long as your AI isn't hyper sycophantic or, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't anything else to kinda add on the, working with abstractions? Like, I know we had some notes, but I think we hit the kind of, like, the notes in abstraction. It's
Yeah, I
just
mean,
I think it's hard to not show it, and I think, I know next week you're on location, so maybe we'll do it the following week, but we talked about the live stream and, like, demonstrating
yes,
some of this stuff,
yes.
'cause I think once you see it, you'll be like, "Oh, there's maybe an approach that I haven't considered, or it's done in a different way." And again, not that this is, like, necessarily the right way to do it, but I think because it's so much dependent on creativity,
Yeah,
and part of that creativity is trying to figure out what the fuck the model is trying to do, or why did it do that? And, like, you can
yeah,
go down the rabbit hole, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that either, but if you're thinking about it from a higher level perspective or a more abstract perspective, you start to kind of understand, uh how it's working in a specific context. And then as you do more of those contexts, you start to kind of it's just like anyone it'd be like working with a person, right? You're like,
yeah,
Jim's really
exactly.
rough on Mondays because he likes to go to the football game. So we're just gonna let him chill. And then Tuesday we'll bring him the bad news, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, we were talking
Fucking
before this,
Jim.
but just show the gym.
It's no person in particular, it's just the first name that came to mind.
I mean, I've given presentations in AI groups about thinking in abstractions and working in systems, and I think uh, as AI progresses, people will need to get more comfortable with that kind of stuff.
Oh,
And it's
100%.
it's one of those it's one of those situations where like I don't know what people don't understand. So, the point of giving
Yeah.
these presentations is asking for the feedback, and it's like trying to help people clarify or understand it in terms or ways that make sense to them. So it's something that I'm constantly working on. I think it's something that we're constantly working on is the communication element of it. So I think the abstraction piece is something that we'll be revisiting as one of the main themes of the rate in general. It's because it
100%.
doesn't apply just to this; it applies to a lot of aspects in life. So for those who have a little bit of confusion on what we mean, because as I'm replaying our conversation, I think abstraction was mentioned several times. It's very common in computer science, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are people who don't really understand what that means because they're not,
Yeah.
they haven't been trained in computer science or whatever. So
No, I
getting
think
some,
that's a really good point. And even how AI works is actually very simple. And yes, you need to know math, but like honestly, if you have a basic grasp of algebra, you can get a pretty good concept of how like the transformer architecture works. But it and that's why they put out a thing, I think it was last week about I think the number one skill that you need now is creativity.
mm,
And as we've talked a lot about on the podcast, that's a learnable skill. And it's almost as much of a process as it is. It's like an art and a science, right?
yeah,
And it and then like secondarily though is judgment. And it and the I think that's more important almost than creativity because like part of the problem with creativity is like when you get stuck or knowing when you get stuck and being able to get out of it, which is kind of judgment.
mm,
But it's also kind of hard to see it from the
yeah,
inside sometimes too.
metacognition. Yeah, you sort of have to, yeah,
Yeah, and so a lot of folks will, you have a mentor, you have a
thought
teacher,
partner or what? Even,
right?
yeah, even just a thought partner, someone,
Yeah,
yeah, or an
coworker,
AI.
yeah, yeah. AI is pretty good at poking holes,
Mhm,
but, and but I feel like they're more coupled also than ever too, because if you're just sitting around judging stuff, like, you're not getting it either because 'cause you're just gonna be like, "Oh, the LLM's bad," or, "Oh, it really
mm,
did good this time." Okay,
mhm.
cool. That's what I hear a lot, and it's like, "Okay, but you're missing the point," right? Like, the three-year-old who does a crayon drawing is not comparable to Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, but maybe someday,
Mm,
right? Or maybe that crayon drawing inspires somebody else to try to improve it, to do better, right? Like, there's all sorts of what are these so-called downstream ramifications of this stuff, and
yeah,
that's why I get so excited for AI because it removes a lot of these barriers, and it allows people to extend themselves so much further than they ever would be able to do. Like, could I have built this app myself coded it? Of course I could have. It would have probably taken me 6 months or so,
Mm,
maybe more, maybe less, right? I don't know what if I had all the capabilities.
yeah.
Um, and I also kinda cheated. I used Flutter for all the UI stuff. So I but again, with creativity, that was my
Yeah.
if I should probably just talk about even just the meta of, like, why I made the decisions I did, because that was a massive architecture decision. That means I didn't have to sit there and build a bunch of Swift UI stuff or like, iOS UI stuff, and then how do I get to the watch? And I have to build a whole 'nother watch UI. Well, I'm using Flutter, and a lot of it's capable. There's a lot of underlying stuff there already. I've talked about this, I think, many times before too, that it's not a perfect solution for everything, but
Mhm.
for this, it actually works super well. And I get all of that knowledge and learning for free. It's also really well documented, so AI really understands it.
Yeah.
But that's part of the creativity of the app is I thought about it and I was like, well, if I did it in Flutter and I, give it some instruction and talk through the API specs and like, I think that was something else I gave it. I did the prototype really quick. It figured it out, however it figured it out. And then I was like, well, here's the API. Like, let's actually look at this and like what other features, can we improve based on, oh, wow, this is really helpful because it tells me exactly what the functionality is. And then it went
Yeah.
and fixed a bunch of stuff that was kind of broken. And that was when I was like, holy crap, that would have taken me 2 hours to probably
By
read and
yourself to, yeah, to
synthesize
go
and
through it.
try to
Exactly. Yep.
and any
Yep.
and so an API, again, is an abstraction for folks who aren't in technical worlds, right?
Take a
But the
shot every time I see
idea
abstraction.
I know, right? But the idea with the API is that you abstract all of the stuff that the API actually does and make it more easily consumable for engineers or for other people to interact with.
Mhm.
Also massively useful for AI because I didn't have to invent a bunch of this stuff because I just use the API that already exists.
Yeah.
But by telling it what I wanted to do and having it do it, even though I knew it was gonna be bad, then my decision was, "Okay, let's dial in to the API now and kinda mop up stuff." And then it went from, like, a 1 or a 2 to, like, a 7
Mhm.
out of, like, 10, and I was like, "Damn, like, it's really good now," right? And it worked
Yeah.
really well, and I was like, "Holy crap," like, simple add. I probably should have it's in Git, so I should almost just, like, take that first commit and, like, show a, like, now and then
Oh,
or
oh, 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 yeah, yeah. Before and after.
then
Yeah,
it
yeah.
yeah, because, like, it's bonkers how far it's come from its, like, original prototype that worked.
And the speed at which it went from prototype to product, right?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
100%. Cool. Well, I don't know if that was helpful for folks, I hope it was.
I think having any insight into how someone else does stuff could be useful, right?
Yeah.
Just learn how other people think. I think that's kind of one of the tenets of what we try and
Well,
do is to show you how people
yeah,
think.
and I think with this too, as we were kinda talking about it, it all makes clear sense to me, but I think having something that you could see and I think
Mm.
going through, and we've talked about the coding live stream, so I think, like, it might be really interesting to just take, the podcast app. I can walk through anti-gravity and how it's, like, set up and works, and you could
Yeah,
literally
yeah.
mimic this because it's all open source, and you can use anti-gravity for free, which is one thing I like about it. You get limits, I don't know what they are, they're fine, and so you could right? You could build your
Yeah,
own
yeah, yeah.
thing and mimic it, and then if you really wanted to go from scratch, do it, but, like
Mhm.
and I think it might be a good example for folks because it's also like, most people understand podcast players are at the very least an audio player, and that's effectively what a podcast player is, right? So it's like, what the thing is.
Mhm.
Um, and then it has a little bit of the abstraction stuff on it too, so I don't know, maybe we'd fix something. I don't know if there's something simpler, but, like, that might be a good thing where it's like you can literally see the app today in the store. You can literally pick it apart. It's simple. I know it's simple enough where you can grasp it, uh,
Yeah.
but
I
not
mean,
so
on
simple that it's, like, kinda hard and, you know
yeah. I mean, that was honestly one of the reasons I pitched in the first place was if there was something we can build during the live stream that we could use,
Yeah.
ourselves, and then yeah, it's a win-win situation, right?
That'd be a cool
But
thing to, yeah, implement like a feature. There's all sorts of
yeah,
ideas
yeah,
out
exactly, exactly.
there.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah,
Could
yeah.
do a live
Oh
vibe
my God.
code or AI code session.
AI, yeah, yeah, yeah. But I,
Yeah.
I think that's the key part is being able to see what the person who's driving is doing, so that
Yeah.
you're putting the words to the visuals.
Yeah.
Because
And then,
there's a huge visual element to it.
yeah, I 100%, but I think people get really stuck on the how, and I think it's more about why, right?
Yes,
Why did
I
I
think in
say that?
general,
Why did
yeah.
I make that decision? And that's that, like, again, that liberal arts education plus experience. And it would also be really interesting to try to take somebody from, like, the audience or take somebody who isn't really technical and sit them down and be like, "What do you want the app to do now?"
Oh, yeah, yeah. That would be fun. That would be really
Right?
fun
And
if
just
we could find someone to do that.
I'm
Yeah,
very confident it will do it. It'd be really interesting to see, how long it would take somebody who really has no idea, like, the tech ecosystem and stuff. But, like, I had a massive Git conflict earlier today, and I
jeez.
was just like my eyes glossed over, and I was like, "This is really bad. I should probably just roll back." And then I was like, "But I have AI."
But yeah, yeah, yeah. I mentioned to you, you could use AI to to handle your Git conflicts and Git merges. Yeah, yeah,
And it was
yeah.
just like it took like 10 minutes of AI fucking around to, like, figure it out, but it did. And I still don't know why it happened. I know what happened, and I don't know why, and I think I'm wondering if AI overwrote something that it shouldn't have.
That does happen where, yes, I've seen that happen where it thinks the state of the code was one thing when it wasn't, and then when it doesn't see it, it reverts it
Yeah.
to back to what its memory was. Yeah,
Well,
of
and
what it
I've
was. Yeah,
noticed, and this is where I learned that new chats are really important in this in anti-gravity specifically, because I was doing some Git stuff, and then I went to another feature and went to move
and
on,
it and it didn't. Yeah,
and then it started, "Oh, I'll just sync this." And I'm like, "No, that is not what I want you to do. I
yes,
need you to now lobotomize and forget that you have the capability, to do it, and then start
yeah.
over." Because, like, and I think that was part of it. So, I mean, but that would be hell for somebody who doesn't, but honestly,
Even for an engineer, a regular engineer, looking at that,
it was it
Git
was
conflicts are
rough.
a pain. Yeah, yeah,
It was
yeah.
really, really rough. And then it had propagated to a couple other of the workspaces, so it was like, really, yeah, I know, right? I was like, I can see why this
Wow.
goes wrong for people really easily. But it'd be really interesting to kind of throw somebody in that environment and see how they would do. Like, I don't wanna, like,
Yeah.
torture somebody, but like, I think if people could really see that, like, no, I don't know what anything he just said was, but then I see it done, you're like, "Oh, that's what it is?"
Hmm.
And, oh, by the way, AI can basically do, most of it, or, like, I think the most powerful thing you can say is like, "I want to do this. How would we do it?
Yeah.
Give me a plan," right? And
Yep.
then if you don't understand the plan, you can ask it or you can Google it, or, right? It's like you don't you the and that's part of creativity,
Yeah. Exactly.
right?
Right.
What are you
We've
trying to
talked
do?
about that before.
Scientific method, what's your hypothesis, right? And I think it's so
Right.
easy to, like, not do that because you're just like, "Build, build, 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 build." But, I also think that's why the people that I talk to that are getting the most out of it are working more through, like, a scientific method or through a creative process
Mhm.
versus just kinda, giving AI the full reign of stuff, and really, and, like, you don't need to really understand what's going on, I don't think, like, it helps, but most engineers don't understand what's really going on, right? You know your little part of the thing and the whole, and you have, a pretty good idea, principal engineers too, like, but, like, anyone who's honest will tell you it's like this massive black box for the most part, and you have to shine a flashlight on it all the time to figure stuff out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alright,
Yeah.
let's call it. Happy Friday.
All right. Yeah. So look forward to next time when we can
Yeah,
do a little bit of live stuff for sure.
that'd be fun. I'll
Absolutely.
have, like, everything I want done by then, and I'll be like, "Damn it."
So that's your homework is not to do any
Is
of
to
that.
not do
Save
something that
yeah,
would be
yeah.
good to do in,
Save it
like,
for the
10 or
podcast.
15 minutes, yeah. That's the other
Yeah.
thing, I don't want it to be, like, 4 hours, but it could be 4 hours if it, how it goes.
Mm.
"Oh, this is
Yes,
really
I very
easy,"
much
4 hours later.